Let's open up the Black Series Archive 6-inch figure of C-3PO. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. As a Star Wars collector, I get really excited and perhaps a little bit caught up in all of the fantastic new collectible releases. I always bring home my new shopping and open them excitedly, and sometimes some of my older items get a little bit forgotten on the back of the shelf. I've had this archive version of C-3PO in the packaging for a little while, and I think it's time to finally let him shine, get him out of the box and on display alongside the rest of my A New Hope Black Series figures. This is the very first C-3PO figure that I'll be opening, so I am quite new to all of his details, and I really can't wait to get my hands on him and actually check out all of the details and articulation. It's gonna be fun. Time to go back to the original Star Wars film instead of getting perhaps a little bit distracted by all of the new toy releases. This one came out a little while ago, but it deserves to be celebrated, so I can't wait to open it up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get the figure out. We'll go over all of the really interesting articulation, sculpting and paintwork. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. I love the concept behind the Black Series Archive line. For other lines, like those fantastic replica Kenner anniversary cards, I cannot bring myself to open them. I love the presentation of them, whereas the Archive line is really pared back. We have a very simple backing card here, so I don't mind getting stuck in and opening them up, which is fantastic because I really want to build out my Black Series 6-inch display with loose figures. Now, I missed this one during its original release, so again, I love the Archive line for re-releasing figures and giving collectors the second chance to add them to their collection. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to get stuck in. So we have this backing card, very squarish, plain black. We have the Star Wars Black Series logo here on the top right, and we have the character name down the side, C-3PO. We have this cute little angular cutout here, which is echoed with this cut-off corner from the front bubble here. Behind the figure, we have a light grey panel, which helps for certain black characters like Darth Vader to really stand out against the black there. We have the archive text down the side here, a little bit underneath the bubble. Sometimes it distorts the text, but it's not really about presentation with this line. We've got a nice big bubble here where we can clearly see the figure inside. Very classic kind of pose here for C-3PO with his angular arms to his side. No accessories with this figure, but I'm not really expecting any. We've got a cardboard insert just inside the bubble here with the front, with a nice artwork here of C-3PO posed there. Moving on to the back, we have a repeat of the artwork from the cardboard insert from the bubble on the front, here in a larger format. I really like the pose and artwork of C-3PO. I think it's really iconic. And something else I love on the backing card here, we have an image of the original product release. We can see the year here is noted as 2016, which of course was that black and red box style around the time of The Force Awakens there. Personally for me, I'm not as fond of the red color behind C-3PO. I think it clashes with his yellow tone a little bit. I actually prefer him against the grey of this backing card. I think it's a little easier on the eyes. Now, of course, C-3PO himself needs no introduction, but we do have a little bit of a blurb about the character here. It reads, C-3PO is a droid programmed for etiquette and protocol. Over the years, he was involved in some of the galaxy's most thrilling battles and is fluent in more than 7 million forms of communication, and then it's repeated in a few different languages there. The rest of the backing card is just copyright text across the bottom and quite small compared to the amount of copyright text on the back of a vintage collection card. I like that it's minimal there. So overall, a very tidy presentation, but I like the archive collection for the intended purpose of opening them up. It does look very tidy. If you do like to keep your action figures from the Black Series line in their packaging, I do find this one a little bit odd outside the fact that most of the Black Series line comes in some form of boxes, which of course have changed a little bit over the years, but the backing cards in the archive range feel like a second chance to open them up, so you can keep boxed versions in their packaging, and these ones you can just rip open. I will be keeping the backing card, but it's not my favorite, especially compared to those fantastic Kenner anniversary cards. I think those look beautiful. This one is very simple, so I like to open these ones up. So let's get stuck in. So now I have C-3PO out of the packaging, and of course he doesn't come with any accessories, so let's get stuck straight in. So of course his iconic gold finish in the movies is achieved by vac metallization, which can be done on toys and replicas as well. Of course, we saw that in the vintage era and some modern toys as well. It's not a process that Hasbro does that often in the modern era. Now, it can be quite fragile, especially for toys that are intended to move a lot or be played with. It does have a tendency to crack or lose its gold tint over time. Sometimes it can go and sort of shift a little bit more to a silver tone, or it can just crack against any areas where we have movement or a lot of touching. So I can see why in the modern era Hasbro often opts for a gold paint instead. Now personally, I don't have a strong feeling either way. I just want him to really look gold and shiny. So I quite like the gold painted finish that we have here. This is not a metallized finish, but it's a metal paint. So I quite like the finish here. And sometimes, especially when it comes to metallic surfaces, you really get a true sense with movement. Seeing how it looks moving under the lights, you can really see the way that the light shifts over the metallic surface. I'm really liking the way he looks out of the packaging. Of course, you don't get a true sort of light hitting the surface when he's under plastic. Getting him out, I can really see the way that the light is shining on the gold. Really nice and even. Now, of course, with paints, you can get flaws that are a little bit sort of easier to sort of gloss over with that thick metallized sort of finish with that sort of specialized process. Gold paint, of course, like any other paint, is susceptible to small little inconsistencies and flaws. So I'm just going to have a quick little look over his finish here. But on the whole, it's looking really nice. I'm loving the way the light hits, and then we get that almost white highlight, like here where the light is hitting his chest. Really, really cool. I like the way it's kind of creating that circular effect on his abdomen there. Really cool. He looks really shiny and just proper, you know, the way C-3PO is supposed to look. So looking at him really close up, there is a tiny, tiny line just by his eye that I can see in person, but as soon as I move him back to here, it's completely gone. So really, really tiny. And of course, we've got those sculpted details here. Those aren't flaws on his chest. I love the way the light is hitting his chest here. Really cool. Moving on to the back. Really nice consistency on these bigger surfaces, like across the shoulders there. That's really nice. And of course, the all-important dome. Of course, this is his sort of shiny appearance as we see in A New Hope. He doesn't have sand, he doesn't have the ding in the head, but he does have his iconic silver leg here as well. Now, the silver leg, for some weird reason, doesn't look quite as shiny as the gold when I'm sort of looking at it in certain light, but when I really get the light on it, it definitely looks a good level of silver. So I like that. I still get that sort of white highlight gleam on those panels there. Really fun. So just having a quick look at the surface of the gold. There is just a few little nicks here on the thigh that are just catching the light. And there's a little bit of a swish in the gold paint just here on the back upper sort of section here of the calf that is not present on this side on the silver there. But because it's right next to a lot of detail lines, and again on the back of the leg, I don't mind it. You know, of course, I know they're mass-produced toys. We always want the paint finish to be flawless, but of course, mass-produced toys, they're going to be, you know, a few little things, a little drop of paint here or there that's not quite in the right place. But because he doesn't have too many places of detail paint, I'm just looking at the overall gold and I'm just really impressed with the shine on this one. You know, it just looks really nice. I want him to be shiny and gold. And I'm just loving the way that he looks under the lights here. So of course, C-3PO does have a few detail points. The eyes, the wires exposed at the abdomen, the palms of his hands, of course. Anthony Daniels, the performer, did of course need to move the hands a little bit. And of course, his silver leg as we see him in A New Hope. So of course, the silver leg, it is different at the hinge here. So we have silver here at the front and we have a little bit of gold here from the back. So the thigh sort of comes down here in the back. We get a little bit of that color extending into the articulation, and the knee articulation going up there in the front, because when we bend the pieces, we can see that they kind of painted that hinge there from the gold thigh is painted silver, but in the back, it is still gold here. So one could argue that perhaps this should be more silver in the back to sort of fit with this knee section here. But if we articulate it, it's completely hidden, and at least it is fully silver here from the front. So one might sort of point out that this should be more silver here in the back of the knee. I don't really pay attention too much to the back of C-3PO's knees in the film, I must admit. I'm looking more from the front, and it looks very nice and tidily painted silver here on the front, so I'm really liking that. So let's quickly look at his palms. Now we just have a black, but the lines of the wires on his palms look really nice. So I think the gold paint used on his fingers is a slightly different gold to the gold on the rest of his body. Something about just the way that it's painted in here, because we've got these really fine lines, but I'm just impressed with how tidy those are. Really nice. Very, very tiny. Really small little tiny wires on the underside of his palms, and the black is really tidy, just matching up to those lines really nicely. Very nice. On the top surface, just plain gold. I think it's possibly just because there's more detail work on the back of his hands as opposed to the sort of more cylinder shapes here that are giving me just as distinct. I don't think it's a different gold paint. Just when I look at it up close, something about the detail lines is just sort of reading it. It's almost, because it's of course, C-3PO was like gloves, you know, which rather than sort of a hard armor component. So I think just the slight organic shape coming through here with the sort of hand shape is giving it a different appearance as opposed to sort of the, the hard armor pieces that Anthony Daniels would have worn on set. So I think it's just giving me slightly sort of a different feel to the piece, even though you can see that this is the same gold. I think it's just sort of throwing off my eyes a little bit. It's the most organic shape that we get on the whole of C-3PO's design here. Now let's take a look at his abdomen. We'll just get his arms out of the way. Now we've got a black sculpted abdomen here with painted wires. So if I can bend him back, wow, okay, doing a little bit of an early preview here of his articulation, I can bend him back all the way and I can see how far that sculpting and painting of the wires goes all the way up. And those are painted really well. The paint matches all of those wires. We've got black, yellow, red, and white there. Really nice. We've even got some little gold attachment points there for the white wires there. And we've got that ribbed torso just in there behind the wires. Really nice detail work there. And again, here on the back, we can see all of those colored wires. The paint is matching up really well. We've got a couple of black ones hidden in there as well. Really nice. Tidy. I really like the detail on this one. This is really cool. So let's take a look at the last little details here, which are of course his iconic eyes. He has so much expression, even though his eyes don't move. It's really, really clever with the design. So I can see that we have yellow painted eyes. We have some circular white dots, and of course the black dot sort of pupils, if you will, in the center. Now those black dots look very well centered in the center of his sort of circular eyes there, if you will, so that we don't get sort of a mismatched googly eye appearance. Of course, it's very important. He is a droid. We want him to have very mechanical looking eyes, very precise and even. And I'm really liking the expression here on his face. Just those eyes look really nice. It's kind of hard because of course they're always lit on a screen apart from when he's powered down, of course. But I think that that actual yellow paint does a pretty good job of looking sort of like a lit, lighted eye as sort of against the gold here. They don't get lost in the gold, even though of course yellow and gold's very close. I think they do a good job of sort of really standing out, because C-3PO's expression comes down to his body movement. Even though his eyes don't move, they do carry a lot of his sort of expressions there. So I am really impressed with the paint. I'm never going to expect, 100% flawless, but if this little wobble here on the back of the calf here is what I've got with this C-3PO figure, I'm super excited, super happy. I love the detail work here on the abdomen because, of course, we've got this big black stripe in his center there that's kind of going to draw the eye against all of this gold. I love the gold finish, the way it looks under the lights, just fantastic. So C-3PO, of course, is kind of an interesting mix between sort of machine and humanoid figure. Of course, on a set, he was performed by Anthony Daniels wearing a mechanical suit. So he's going to have to sort of move like a human, but there were some really interesting restrictions to the suit. You know, you couldn't move completely normally. Now, of course, we have these sort of rods, these are sort of piston type attachments around his arms. So as expected, this figure doesn't actually move at the elbows. It is fixed. These are not articulation points. We've got these tiny little rods that are actually fixed at each end. So I'm not going to be able to move at the elbows, but we have another point of articulation. Now it looks like at these ridged points here. Now if I hold it still, I'm thinking, yes. So there, you can see if I hold it, it's a little tight. I can move these kind of shoulder cap pieces here. We can move there. And I'll just get that back lined up. But then, of course, we've also got this attachment point just below those shoulder caps here, because I was also able to move those parts, and we can move his arms there, much like Anthony Daniels would on set. I think it's kind of funny because, of course, Anthony Daniels was also restricted by these rods and the attachment on the armor. And C-3PO he doesn't stand with his arms down by his sides. He has them always kind of in this angular position. So it makes sense that the action figure can't put its arms down by its side like a normal humanoid character figure would. It feels right that he sits there with his elbows in this sort of triangular shape. Really nice. It just looks authentically C-3PO'd for this position. Really, really cool. And of course, as I showed before, we can bend through the torso, much like on a set, of course, we would be able to do that. A little bit tight to the side. You can kind of hear that squeak. It's a little bit fighting because I don't think C-3PO turns a lot to the side, but we do get front and back there, which I do like. That's the more important movement axis there. Now, of course, it's very important for C-3PO to be able to sort of get some expression there with the head. Now, of course, Anthony Daniels was kind of locked into the headpiece, but he does able to move the head there really nicely. I like, even though we've got these sort of a little circular sections here that I thought might be a little bit restrictive, I can still get quite a range of movement to the side and actually quite reasonably up and down there as well. So we can get some really good poses, you know, looking at other action figures on display, you know, different scenes. Really nice there, because of course we're going to sort of guide his expression with his poses. You know, if we want him sort of exasperated or, you know, in shock or surrender, we can throw his hands up there. Now he can't, you know, hold anything. His hands are always kind of like this. He doesn't come with accessories. I wouldn't expect him to hold a blaster. So we've just got sort of a neutral hand pose there, but we can move at the wrists very freely at the wrists. And we do have, bit tight with the backwards and forwards. We can see the articulation point there at the wrists, especially when he's got his hands up, but that's a little bit tight. You can see there, that hand's a little bit better. I can get it flexing forward and back a little bit, but there. I like them straight. I don't think I'd be doing that too much with C-3PO, but of course we can turn them there if we want to get a little bit of expression there. So let's check out the hips. Now the attachment points on the inside here are also gold. Very nice gold there. Now I'm curious, yes, we've got the swivel articulation here as well, nicely hidden under this design line here as well. So we can see that this part is attached in there at the hip, and this part we've got that lovely sort of exterior interior sort of swivel rotation there. Really nice. We can see that sort of cut out there in the back. I love the shine on this. So it's very high here at the hip, but this cutout at the front should mean we can get about there. That's pretty high actually for C-3PO. Of course, we don't see him going upstairs too much. It would be hard to lift the legs much in the original costume suit, but that is actually a pretty high level. And I tested out the knees before, so we can get sort of about there for sort of stepping. which is pretty reasonable for C-3PO. You know, he doesn't have a lot of a huge range of motion. He's not doing flips like Jedi characters, so I don't actually mind the movement there. So if I move this to the side, I'm hitting the high point of this thigh against that hip. So I don't really want to flex that, and it's creaking a lot. So not really too much to the side because it's very high. I'm not really going to get much there, and I can't, even if I swivel it, I can't swivel this high point away because of course the original costume was trying to cover Anthony Daniels as much as possible in armor plates. We've got a little bit of an exposure here. Of course, we do need a little bit of movement in his legs so he can move around on set, but it means that we're not really going to ever get his legs up much to the side there. But I don't really think of that as a natural range of motion for C-3PO anyway. Not really to the back either. We've got a very tight seam here with the top of the thigh and that sort of butt plate there in the back. So it's not really going back much, just that forward movement there as I would expect. But we go about there for the legs there. We hit completely there with the armor plate. Much tighter in the seams than Stormtrooper armor, of course. There's a sort of a few similarities, you know, in terms of the components, you know, thighs and calves and things like that, but it's not supposed to have sort of those exposed sections where we can see the black undersuit of Stormtrooper armor. We're not supposed to see the undersuit under C-3PO. It's supposed to look completely like a droid. So we can see the ankles here, a little bit of an exposed articulation point, but again, painted nicely to match the finish of the metallic shine of those pieces there. I love the sculpting detail on those shoes as well, really nice. We've got the sculpting there on the underside, we've got some peg holes there, and the sort of stamp details there, Hasbro LFL China on the underside there. But, oh, actually quite a lot there on the foot. That's more than I was expecting. The back there of the shoe, if you will, goes up quite high. So we've got a little bit of sort of articulation there with the feet, because we do want him to stand up very sturdily, especially with the Black Series. If I'm going to sort of have him in different positions, he stands up pretty well, actually. I was a little bit worried because I've, you know, bent his limbs and arms in all different positions there. Of course, like most figures, you got to find that right center of balance. But yeah, really nice. Now, one little sculpting detail that's just caught my eye is the kind of the little pistons here around the neck. You can kind of see that the plastic goes back to sort of form a complete piece. It's not hollow. It should kind of look a little bit more like this section here, where it's kind of like a hollow rod sort of supporting up. You can see, if I put his arms down, we can see that it kind of trails back, that it's not a rod with a hollow gap in behind it. So just a small little thing there with the sculpting. It should look like the rod's here, but looking from the front, it's kind of hidden behind that front sculpted piece. So it doesn't really catch my eye. It's just because I'm moving him around a lot in the light. I just kind of caught my attention there from the side. Moving on to the back, of course, we've just got that lovely gloss paint job here on all of these glossy surfaces. And I love how much I can bend him at the torso. That was something I was not really expecting. Really nice there. So I love just the expression that I get from him. I often say that I like Star Wars action figures, Black Series and Vintage Collection, where when I look at them, I can sort of hear the character voice, hear dialogue in my head from the series and films that they're in. And something, you know, when I look at C-3PO, if I can hear the iconic accent coming through, it really does sort of set the scene for it, you know, because that's what we're really doing with our toys. We're kind of paying homage to our favorite scenes and favorite characters, and I want them to sort of feel like they're sort of bringing them to life. And I can sort of see the way that he moves with his sort of, you know, his very robotic movement there with his arms, the expression, you know, with his head and the poses I can get with this. It feels like C-3PO. The way that I pose it feels like the way C-3PO moves. And I think that that's really fun, the way it translates into this figure. I've owned, and I do own, a lot of the vintage collection, and generally going back, Hasbro and Kidder 3.75 inch. But this is my first 6-inch figure, where I really get to see a larger surface of that gold finish in this large scale. And it's just been so fun going through all of the painted details in this slightly larger scale, seeing the posability of it. It's just really fun. He's really cool. I'm really trying to build up some of my older Black Series figures that I've had stored away while I'm getting a little bit caught up with some of the newer releases from shows like Andor, Ahsoka, and of course The Mandalorian. There's a lot of Black Series figures from The Mandalorian. I want to make sure that my original Trilogy figures are still getting out and having their time to shine on my display shelf. And of course, if there's a figure to shine, it's C-3PO, and shine he does. I love the finish. I know the paint won't be to every collector's taste, that they much prefer that metallic vac metallized finish, which is gorgeous, but personally I'm always a little bit nervous about some of those metal finishes. For me personally, I've had a lightsaber hilt or two that has unfortunately sort of tarnished over time, where that metal sort of coating has degraded with age. And sometimes when it comes to Star Wars collectibles, age is something that we just can't protect against. We can lock things away behind glass and away from sunlight and touch, but sometimes there are just things that will just slowly degrade even when we just look at it without touching. And so I don't mind the paint. I know it's got a long longevity, and I can get my hands on it and pose and just sort of really check it out without worrying about chipping, cracking, or potentially damaging that beautiful surface. Sometimes I want a toy that I can kind of get my hands on and have fun posing, and I really like the way that he can pose. I can get a little bit of a side-to-side wobble just kind of doing this here, but he doesn't hold it very severely. He's a little bit off kilter, but it's not a strong sort of side-to-side pose there. Not as much as I do from some characters there, and very limited actually twisting there side to side. But I like that sort of front and back, he sort of leans and stuff like that, and just those robotic arms. That's just so fun. I like how freely I can do this, but it holds those positions really well. I like just being able to get those iconic C-3PO poses. I can just hear his voice in my head. Really cool. I've got to build out my A New Hope collection. I've got a few more to go, like Grand Moff Tarkin and a Tusken Raider. I've got the Land Speeder already, so I'm hoping to add C-3PO into my Black Series Land Speeder and start to build out my New Hope scene with that one. He stands up really well. This has been so much fun. I'm glad that I'm taking the time to go back and open up some of my older Black Series figures. They've been in their packaging for a little too long, and it's just so fun to see something like this under the lights, seeing that shine. He looks really cool. This has been so much fun. Oh, now I've got to track down an R2-D2. Here in New Zealand, R2-D2 is super popular and he's really hard to find. I've got to make it a mission now, because now that I've got C-3PO, I desperately need his astromech best friend to put beside him. I do own a couple, but sadly they are all in that fantastic Kenner anniversary cards that I really don't want to open. So I might have to stand this one next to my carded version of R2-D2 for now, because I want to see them side by side. But I've got to track down one to open. It's really hard to find here in New Zealand. I'm going to have to source that one from overseas, because he needs his friend and he looks fantastic. This has been a fantastic opening up. I had so much fun, and I think he just looks so shiny and really pretty. Very cool. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series Archive 6-inch figure and had just a lot of fun checking out his golden details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently opened up the Archive Chewbacca figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.